Have you ever been humiliated in front of an entire room just because of how you speak? They didn't see me as a doctor that day. Not a man who'd graduated top of his class. Not someone who had worked 16-hour shifts through the pandemic. Not even a human being with dignity. I was just an accent. My name is Dr. Vijay Roshan. I'm 40 years old. Born in Chennai. Raised on discipline, humility, and an obsession with medicine that kept me alive through war zones, underfunded clinics, and one grueling visa battle after another. But none of that mattered the moment Harper Benjamin opened her mouth. It happened on a Tuesday. Bright skies, clean air, and a luncheon that was supposed to celebrate the hospital's top donors. I wasn't meant to be there, but Dr. Levin, my supervisor, asked me to represent pediatrics while he flew out to New York. I should have said no. The room was filled with money, polished shoes, designer perfume, the kind of place where people drink sparkling water and call it still, just to feel superior. I stood near the buffet table, holding a plate I didn't plan to eat from. Listening, nodding, smiling. That's when I first heard her voice. "You must be the new foreign recruit," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to turn. I turned, polite. "Dr. Vijay Roshan, pediatric intensive care." Her eyebrows lifted, amused. "Oh, you speak English?" I wasn't sure at first. Some people chuckled. I smiled faintly. Let it pass. She stepped closer, eyes sharp. "Tell me something, Dr. Roshan. Do they not teach pronunciation properly in your country?" I blinked. Did I hear her right? She tilted her head, mock confused. "It's just so thick. Your accent. Like a bad radio signal." Laughter. Real, open laughter this time. My face stayed still. My chest didn't. I could feel something boiling just beneath my collar. "Where exactly did you say you were from?" she asked. "India." And then she smiled. That cruel crocodile smile. I thought so. You know, I've always wondered, why do you people always smell like curry? The room froze, then cracked with more laughter. A few nervous coughs. A few gasps. But no one said a word to stop her. I looked around. My colleagues. My administrators. Other doctors. Donors. No one looked me in the eye. My fingers tightened around the plate. Not in anger. In restraint. I took a slow breath. And then I smiled. And said to her calmly, "Do you receive a badge for being rude?" And without waiting for her response, I turned away from her. Not because I was okay, but because I had just made a decision. This wouldn't be forgotten. I left the luncheon early, took the back stairs to the staff lounge, stood at the sink for a full 10 minutes, just washing my hands. Over and over. There was no curry on me, no smell, no shame. But it still clung to my skin like poison. That night, I stayed late, checked charts, reviewed scans, walked the quiet halls of the pediatric wing, the way I always did when I needed clarity. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. People like Harper think accents are weakness, think politeness is permission, but they forget, sometimes, the man they're mocking is the only one in the room who can save a life. 2 days later, I heard her name again. Harper Benjamin. Major donor. Socialite. Wife of a real estate tycoon. But more importantly, mother of Ethan Benjamin. A 10-year-old boy with a rare autoimmune condition. On file. Treated once before in our hospital. That file sat in our emergency intake system. Outdated, incomplete, but familiar to me now. I didn't know when I'd see her again, but something told me I would. And when I did, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I wouldn't need to shame her in public. I'd just do what I was trained to do. Save lives. With precision. With power. Because revenge doesn't always look like rage. Sometimes, it looks like control. It's not the words that break you, it's the way people laugh while you stand there bleeding inside. 1 week after the luncheon, my badge stopped opening certain doors. Not literally, but metaphorically. I was no longer being invited to senior meetings. Emails I used to get looped into? Gone. My ideas? Ignored in morning rounds. It started slow, subtle, but in a hospital like ours, subtlety kills faster than disease. Then came the email. Subject: Personnel Review Inquiry. I stared at it for nearly a full minute. The sender? The complaint? Harper Benjamin. She claimed I had stared at her too long at the luncheon. That she felt uncomfortable, unsafe, and intimidated. I guess my crime was having the audacity to ask her a question. She never mentioned the part where she mocked my accent, or reduced my culture to a joke, or called me out in front of 50 donors. She flipped the script, like women like her always do, and painted herself as the victim. The kicker? She used the phrase, felt unsafe. That one always works, especially when used by someone white, someone wealthy. Suddenly, I was the problem. In the staff lounge, whispers swirled. I heard them before I even stepped in. Someone cleared their throat. Another went silent. But one voice didn't drop low enough. He's just a diversity hire, anyway. They needed the numbers. It came from Dr. Miles, a junior resident, the same one I had mentored for 2 months last year. He didn't know I was behind him, until he turned, until our eyes met. He froze. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just walked past him and poured myself a coffee. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't flinch. But inside, something hardened. Not because of what he said, but because I knew that's what they all thought. Let me tell you something. They think we come here, immigrants, foreigners, outsiders, and feel grateful just to be tolerated. What they don't know is what it takes to stand where I stand. I'm not just a pediatric doctor. I'm the lead specialist for our elite emergency pediatric response team. 3 doctors. 1 mission. We go in when no one else can. Critical cases. Pediatric codes. High-risk trauma. They don't call us because they like us. They call us because we save lives no one else can. And that's what Harper Benjamin didn't understand. She thought she was making my life smaller with her complaint. She didn't know that behind the curtain, I was preparing for the day she'd need me again. It came sooner than I thought. 2:14 a.m. My emergency line buzzed. I was already awake, reviewing cases. Insomnia had become my new friend. The voice on the other end was urgent. Dr. Roshan, we have a pediatric code incoming. Requesting your team. I sat up. What's the case? 10-year-old boy. Suspected autoimmune flare. Oxygen saturation dropping. Febrile seizures. Multi-organ distress. Name. There was a pause. Then, Ethan Benjamin. I didn't hesitate or say a word. I grabbed my coat, threw on my badge, and texted my team. Meet me in Bay 4. Code red. Be 6 minutes. As I stepped outside, the night air cut through me like ice. But my heart stayed warm. Not from satisfaction. From focus. This wasn't about Harper anymore. This was about a child. A life. A boy with 10 fingers, 1 weak heart, and a system shutting down from the inside. And I was the man standing between him and the dark. We met the ambulance at the hospital's east entrance. My team moved like a machine. IVs prepped, monitors ready, oxygen flowing. The trauma bay smelled like bleach, metal, and adrenaline. Ethan Benjamin lay unconscious on the gurney, his little chest rattling with every strained breath. His skin was pale, lips tinged with blue. His chart said, possible septic shock. Suspected meningococcemia. Rapid deterioration. Translation? A rare, aggressive bacterial infection. One that moves fast. One that kills even faster. I'd seen it before. In Mumbai. In Lagos. In war zones where the air was thick with fear. But never in Beverly Hills. Never in a child with a private driver and a platinum insurance card. There was organized chaos. Nurses darted in and out. Machines beeped. For bags were hung. Fluids rushed in. Blood samples rushed out. I was calm. Not cold. Just focused. Surgical. That's when the doors burst open and she stormed in. Harper Benjamin. Hair tangled. Heels in her hand. Eyes bloodshot from crying. She shoved past the nurse. Where's my son? Where is he? She looked like every mother does in that moment. Terrified, helpless, desperate. And for a split second, I almost pitied her. Almost. She didn't see me at first. I had my back turned, my voice low as I gave orders to the resident. I called for a lumbar puncture kit and high-dose 4 antibiotics. Then I turned. She looked up and froze. It took her a second. Then she heard my voice again. I didn't flinch, smirk, or say a word to her. I just looked at her. Controlled. Surgical. And then I stepped forward. Ma'am, I said. Please move. You're in my way. She stumbled back. Speechless. Please stand back. We're doing everything we can to save your son. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. And then, her face drained like someone had pulled the plug. She blinked once. Twice. Her mouth opened. She whispered. I didn't know. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My eyes met hers with the quiet authority of a man who owed her nothing. And then I said, your son will receive the best care possible. No warmth. No smile. Just clinical promise. She stuttered. I didn't mean what I said before. It was a joke. I didn't know. Her face twisted, like she couldn't believe I was real. Like her worst nightmare had taken human form. I had taken control of the whole situation. Harper wasn't allowed inside. But through the glass window, I could feel her eyes burning into me. Maybe she wanted to scream. Maybe she wanted to beg. But all she could do was watch. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. I didn't do it for her. I did it for Ethan. Because I am a doctor and saving lives is what I live for. But make no mistake, she would never forget this night. And it was only just beginning. We sedated Ethan. Hooked him to a ventilator. Drew spinal fluid. Sent it to the lab. The diagnosis confirmed what I already knew, meningococcemia. Deadly. Rare. Hours could mean the difference between life and a funeral. I started him on ceftriaxone and vancomycin. Aggressive treatment. Risky doses. But I wasn't guessing. I knew what I was doing. Outside the trauma bay, Harper sat curled in a chair like a child herself. When I stepped out, she jumped up. Please, she begged. Please save him. He's all I have. She reached out. Like she wanted to touch my arm. Or maybe stop time. Or reverse it. But I stepped back. My face didn't change. I'm doing everything I can, I said. Her lip trembled. I was horrible to you. I know that. And I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't know you were. That was the moment. Right there. The line she crossed again. I didn't know you were someone important. That's what she really meant. I wasn't a human being to her. I was an accent. a skin tone, a target. Until tonight. Now I was a lifeline. Do you think I became a doctor so people would treat me better? I asked. She shook her head, confused, crying. I don't know. I didn't, I said. I became a doctor so I can help people and also never have to beg someone like you for help. She crumpled, literally, onto the hospital bench. But I didn't walk away out of cruelty. I walked away because Ethan needed me. For the next 6 hours, we fought for that boy. Temperature spikes. Oxygen crashes. A rash spread down his torso, telltale sign of vascular collapse. We transfused platelets, controlled the clotting, monitored every hour, and by 10 a.m., his vitals finally stabilized. He wasn't out of the woods, but he was no longer dying. I stepped into the waiting room. Harper jumped up. Is he? He's stable, I said. We'll monitor him closely for the next 72 hours. If he responds well, there's no reason to expect long-term complications. She covered her mouth, so whispered, thank you. But I didn't say you're welcome. Not to her. Let me be clear. I didn't save Ethan to teach her a lesson. But life has its own way of circling back. Because while I was focused on saving her son's life, her past was quietly catching up with her. A complaint she filed, a report she lied in, an email trail she thought was deleted. And when the board called her in, that's when the real punishment began. Some people think doctors only see symptoms. They forget we also read between the lines. Blood work, CT scans, dosages, allergies, reactions. Every line on a chart tells a story. But sometimes, the real story is the one someone tried to hide. And in Harper Benjamin's case, she wasn't just hiding it. She was profiting off it. Ethan was stable, hooked up to monitors, breathing through a CPAP. The worst was behind him, but not over. I was reviewing his electronic medical records for updates when something stopped me. A flagged note, severe penicillin allergy, anaphylaxis risk. But that didn't add up, because in our emergency protocol, he'd already been given amoxicillin early in triage before I arrived. And nothing happened. No rash, no reaction, nothing. I pulled up his labs. 0 histamine spike. No IgA elevation. Not even mild flushing. Someone had faked the allergy. And that's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I requested a full treatment log. His pediatric history was bizarre. Dozens of ER visits over 5 years. Always for vague issues, chronic fatigue, unexplained fevers, allergic reactions that never aligned with test results. Each time, scans, tests, procedures. Each one billed under a rare pediatric plan. A top-tier private insurance package that covers nearly everything with minimal verification. That package? Reserved for children with complex immunological conditions. Ethan had no such diagnosis, but someone had been pretending he did. I opened the billing trail. MRI for a suspected seizure disorder, no neurological referral. Allergy panel repeated 5 times, all inconclusive, but always logged as emergent. An overnight ICU stay last year for probable vasculitis, based on a bruise from soccer practice. It was a pattern. Fabricated symptoms. Manipulated terminology. High-cost interventions. Insurance codes that didn't match clinical evidence. Over $450,000 in claims. And then I saw the name on the primary policy holder. Harper J. Benjamin. Now, let me be clear. I didn't do this to ruin her. I didn't do this because she mocked my accent. I did it because I've seen what real suffering looks like. Children in villages with no antibiotics. Mothers walking miles for clean water. So when I see someone like Harper, exploiting a system meant for the sick and vulnerable, something in me refuses to stay silent. I flagged the records. Quietly. Internally. No fanfare. No drama. Just a compliance tag sent to the hospital's internal audit unit. They didn't waste time. By that evening, an investigator arrived from the compliance division. He requested copies of all Ethan's records, including Harper's insurance filings. I kept treating Ethan, but Harper? She was about to find out the cost of treating people like props in her little performance. The next morning, Harper was asleep in the ICU family lounge, wrapped in a designer shawl, phone clutched in her hand. A hospital administrator tapped her shoulder. "Mrs. Benjamin, we need you to come with us. There's been a flag on your insurance profile." I watched her leave, but I saw the way her face changed. Confusion, then panic. She stood up, whispering something, eyes darting like a trapped animal. 10 minutes later, I got the notification. Insurance fraud alert. Patient account frozen. Legal action pending. The thing about karma? It doesn't need to yell. It just walks in, hands you a letter, and watches you fall apart. By noon, the entire board had been briefed. Harper had been submitting fraudulent claims for over 4 years. She'd registered Ethan as having a chronic autoimmune condition, complete with forged physician referrals and manipulated lab results. The penalties? Federal investigation, civil liabilities, and the cherry on top? Her name was already being quietly blacklisted from every elite donor circle in the city. Her social status? Ashes. But Harper didn't go down quietly, because just after I finished adjusting Ethan's meds, she stormed into the ICU like a hurricane in designer boots. "You!" The word echoed through the unit. Nurses turned. Parents froze. Machines beeped louder. I looked up, still wearing my surgical coat. She was red-faced, shaking. "You set me up. You're behind this, aren't you? You ruined me." I didn't flinch. I simply looked her dead in the eye and said, "Ma'am, this is an intensive care unit. You need to leave." Her jaw dropped. He's my son. And he's receiving the best care available," I replied. "But this unit is not the place for outbursts." A security guard appeared behind her. She hesitated, then broke. Tears streamed down her face, not from grief, but humiliation. She turned and stormed out. And I turned back to my patient. "Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos." You see, revenge doesn't always come in shouting matches or fiery speeches. Sometimes it's quiet. It's truth. It's a man you mocked, silently protecting your son, while you lose everything trying to protect your lies. She called me a monster, as if I hadn't been the one holding her son's hand through every seizure. You know what's funny? People like Harper Benjamin think the worst thing you can call someone like me is a foreigner, a diversity hire, an outsider. But when their world starts collapsing, suddenly they need a villain to blame. And this time, it was me. It started with a blog post, anonymous, emotional, loaded with phrases like medical sabotage and systemic racism in reverse. It didn't take long to figure out who wrote it. Harper. Then came the social media comments. She's a mother fighting for justice. She just wants answers. Doctors like him are a danger to our community. I wasn't named directly, but I didn't have to be. The hospital board called an emergency meeting. Security footage, patient charts, nurse logs, lab reports. Everything was pulled. And what did they find? That I had clocked over 30 hours without a single complaint. That I had stayed by Ethan's bedside through 2 seizures. That I had personally requested an experimental antitoxin that turned his case around. Every nurse, every tech, even the janitor, wrote statements. They didn't just support me. They defended me. Harper? She showed up at the ICU 3 days later, wearing all white, big sunglasses, sobbing like a martyr. Security stopped her at the entrance. "You're not allowed here, ma'am. You were informed." She tried to push through. "I'm his mother." They didn't budge, because 2 days earlier, she'd verbally assaulted a nurse, called her a traitor, threw a water bottle, screamed that the whole ICU was run by foreigners. She was officially banned, but that didn't stop her from trying again. The next day, I was reviewing Ethan's dosage when my pager buzzed. Unauthorized visitor, ICU hallway. I stepped outside. There she was, tear-streaked, mascara smeared, shaking. "Please," she whispered. I didn't mean what I said. I said nothing. "You saved my son. You're saving him. I know that." Still nothing. "I can make a donation," she said. "To your department. To your charity. Whatever you want." I folded my arms. Then her voice dropped. Softer. Slower. "I know how lonely it must be, being so far from your country. No one really sees you here." She placed her hand on mine. "Let me see you, Dr. Roshan." That was it. I stepped back. Still professional. "You need to leave, before we have to call security again." And I walked back in, because I wasn't going to let her turn this into a drama. This wasn't a soap opera. This was her son's life. And my integrity. Ethan was improving fast. In fact, faster than expected. Vitals stabilizing. Inflammation down. Eating solids. Asking for cartoons. And through it all, I stayed by his side. We read books. We played memory games. I even taught him a Hindi word, Shakti. It means strength. The boy had plenty of it. His mother? Not so much. That evening, I was charting his recovery when I got a knock on the office door. It was Dr. Brandt, one of the board members. He closed the door behind him, smiled, and said, "We've been watching everything. How you handled the pressure, the grace, the skill." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, an offer. Head of Pediatric Emergency Response. The highest position in our department. I looked up at him. "Why me?" He chuckled. "Because you didn't just treat a patient. You treated a system with integrity." But before I accepted, there was one thing I had to do. I requested a 10-minute meeting. In a private consultation room. They brought Harper in. She was nervous. Makeup less for once. She opened her mouth to speak. I raised my hand. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "And I'm not here for closure." She looked confused. "I'm here to say one thing." I leaned forward. "My name is Dr. Vijay Roshan. I speak 5 languages. I've trained on 3 continents. And I held your son's hand through every seizure." Her lips trembled. "You called me a monster. You lied against me." I paused. "But monsters don't stay up 3 nights straight making sure your child doesn't die." I stood. That's all. And I walked out, not for her, but for myself. Because you see, sometimes the greatest revenge is not vengeance. It's becoming undeniable. You ever carry shame that doesn't belong to you? The kind handed to you by a stranger's ignorance, then passed around a room like dirty laundry? That was my life. For years, I swallowed humiliation with a smile. Laughed off jokes about my accent. Let people butcher my name just to keep the peace. But the day I walked out of that room, after looking Harper Benjamin in the eye, something changed in me. I didn't just save her son, I saved myself. And I wasn't going back. Ethan was discharged a week later. Smiling. Holding a get well soon card my team made for him. He called me Dr. V. As he left, he stopped at the door, looked up and asked, "Will I see you again?" I knelt beside him. "Maybe one day, but you're going to be too busy being awesome." He giggled and hugged me. It was the purest moment I'd had in months. Behind him, Harper stood still. Not a word. Not a thank you. Not even a nod. Just shame. The kind that finally found its rightful owner. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. The following Monday, I stepped into my new office. Head of Pediatric Emergency Response. There was no parade, no balloons, no LinkedIn announcement. just quiet respect. Doctors shook my hand. Nurses smiled longer. Janitors nodded with pride. Not because I'd climbed the ladder, but because I'd climbed out of the box they tried to keep me in. I started using my real name in full, Dr. Vijayendra Roshan, and I corrected anyone who shortened it. I earned that name. My father gave it to me with trembling hands the day I left India. Said it meant victorious protector of light. Funny how names come full circle. A few weeks later, I got an envelope at the front desk. No stamp, no sender, just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside, a handwritten letter. From Harper. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say, you were the one person in that building who truly believed my son stood a chance and you fought for his life. You didn't just save his life. You saved mine too. Not because I deserved it, but because he did. I've started therapy. I'm dealing with my legal troubles. I'm selling the house. And I'm trying to be a better mother. For him. Thank you. I folded it carefully and slid it into a drawer. Not to keep her words, but to remind myself of the man I refused to become. 1 month later, I was invited to speak at a regional medical conference. I walked on stage. Room full of suits. Specialists. Scholars. First slide on the screen? A picture of my father, working barefoot in our village's one-room clinic. I speak with an accent because I speak multiple languages. I smell like spices because my culture has flavor. And I'm not a diversity hire. I'm diversity, delivering excellence. The room erupted, and I smiled, not for the applause, but because, for the first time, I didn't flinch from the spotlight. I walked into it, and owned it. They say revenge is sweet. But this wasn't revenge. Not really. It was a reckoning. Because while she was mocking my voice, I was learning how to use it. While she was judging my skin, I was saving what lay beneath hers. And while she saw me as less than, I was becoming more. More than her stereotype. More than a checkbox. More than a man in a white coat. I was myself. One night, a nurse found me in the hallway, leaning against the wall. She smiled. Tough day? I shook my head. Good one, actually. She hesitated, and said, just so you know, you're the reason my little brother wants to go into medicine. I looked at her, surprised. He saw you walk past last week. That's who you were. Said you looked like him. I felt something tighten in my chest. If he can do it, maybe I can too. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. Not to fix my tie. Not to flatten my hair. But just to look. Really look. And for the first time in years, I saw a man who wasn't pretending anymore. No shame. No mask. No bending. Just Vijayendra Roshan. A son. A doctor. A man who didn't need to humiliate someone to feel powerful. Because true power? It's silent. Steady. Unapologetic. And sometimes, the greatest thing you can save isn't a patient. It's the part of yourself they tried to take. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of your background or accent? How did you respond? Do you believe people can truly change after being exposed for their prejudice? What would you have done if you were in Dr. Vijay's position? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories just for you.